Albert Breer wrapping up his summer vacay. By the way, you had an in-depth article on the 2024 quarterback class. I don't think I'm overstating it. Maybe I am. You know Jim Nagy. You've talked to Trent Dilfer, Jordan Palmer. What do they think about Caleb Williams?
Well, I think, it's interesting because there's this class of quarterback coming into the league that's very, very rare, and I think if you look over the course of my lifetime, there are really four guys who fit into that category. And it's not like how good they became. It's how good they were coming into the league. It's what NFL people thought of them. And the four in that category would be John Elway, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, and Trevor Lawrence. Everybody I've talked to says Caleb Williams with another good year has a chance to be in that category where he projects as the kind of guy who's going to be good almost no matter where he goes. He checks every single box. There aren't a lot of things to pick at. And, it's interesting, Colin, because going into that exercise, which I've done a few times now over the years, I was sort of expecting some people to say, okay, Caleb Williams and Drake May are sort of on this one tier and everybody else is below them. To a man, it wasn't like that. It was Caleb Williams, number one, no question, one of the best prospects we've seen over the last 20 or 30 years at the position. Then a drop, then Drake May, then a drop, then the pack. So that should give you an idea of the way all of these people look at Caleb Williams right now going into what's expected to be a very, very big year for him at USC.
So the Saquon Barkley thing, I said to J-Mac earlier in the show, I said, once you make an investment on the house, Daniel Jones of that magnitude, you need insurance. Brian Daboll is insurance. Saquon Barkley, I could argue, is an insurance policy to ensure the Daniel Jones investment works. Don't they have to pay him?
Yeah, for a number of different reasons. I mean, part of it's what you're talking about, where I think, Daniel Jones' breakout year in year 5 kind of happens year 4 happens because Saquon Barkley is next to him. The same way Dak Prescott had a huge rookie year because Zeke Elliott was next to him. The same way Jared Goff broke out when Todd Gurley was next to him. So that part of it, I think, exists, the part you're referencing. The other part is he's a guy who was really big as far as them building their program in year 1 under Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. And the locker room pays attention to who you're rewarding. And this is a guy who's fought through injuries, who's a good guy, who's a great player, who I think, even if you view running backs as not worth the type of contract that he's commanding right now, you look at it and you say, this is a guy where when we pay him, it's going to resonate in the locker room in a very, very positive way. And so I think that that's a really, really important piece of this as well. Now, you're hearing some saber rattling now. That's just the way these things work. The way the franchise tag works, generally in March, the tag goes on. The player isn't happy about it. The player and team will have some back and forth negotiation. It won't work. That'll get backburnered. The team will go through free agency and the draft and all of that. And they'll wait until a deadline comes, and then they'll pick up negotiations with a few days left till the deadline. They'll figure out we're still a little ways apart. There'll be some saber rattling, and when the deal gets done, the deal gets done. I think both sides have a lot of motivation to get this done because, the Giants, again, it would be validating the program in a certain way. And for Saquon, he's a running back who's played 5 years, who has a lot of injuries, a lot of miles on his legs now, so he should take the money when he can get it. And I don't think the gap is astronomical. So my guess would be there's maybe a little more saber rattling over the next couple of days. Then they find a way to get something done before 4 o'clock Eastern on Monday. I was looking at,
I think it was PFF, most and least talented rosters in the NFL. And the Rams are in the bottom 3 or 4, right around, like bad teams. And there was a story that came out, I believe, in The Athletic last week that the Rams considered moving Stafford. Now, I was told by a source I trust that they wanted to redo his contract. He wasn't interested. It limits what they can do, and they were frustrated with him. And I could also see them next year taking a quarterback because the way to catch up in this league with personnel is rookie quarterback, go buy 4 good players. So your thoughts on the Stafford story that he got him a ring, he's now banged up. Are they close to moving him if things go south this year?
I mean, if they're like 0-8 at the trade deadline, I guess you can't rule anything out, But I think this is part of a more global thing. Like, if you're talking about shopping a guy like we're looking to offload him, that's not what they were looking to do. But they did earmark this as a reset year. And what I was told over and over again in February and March and when they traded Jalen Ramsey was, we feel like if we don't do this now, it's going to take 2 years, not one, for us to get out underneath all of the cap debt that we've built up over the years and building the roster as aggressively as we have. So we need to hit the reset button now. And so when you're going through the process of hitting the reset button, you explore everything. And I think that's more of what this was than anybody being shopped. And, obviously there's some big names that were on their roster, like Ramsey, like Leonard Floyd, that aren't there anymore. And part of that was just the reality of where they are and wanting to come out of this year with a clean salary cap in 2024 and being able to be aggressive again in 2024, having a first-round pick for the first time in forever in 2024. So that's what this was. And part of that, of course, is examining, does our quarterback want to go through this? Does our quarterback want to go through a reset year when he's coming off an elbow injury and he's at Matthew Stafford's age? All of that needed to be sorted out, and I think it was sorted out, and they're full steam ahead. This is a team, of course, Colin, you'll remember, there was a point there in March when they were close to the salary cap, and I think they had like 48 guys on their roster or something. They didn't even have a full roster. So, there were a lot of pains that they had to go through this offseason, and I think that's where a lot of that Stafford buzz came from.
So Robert Saleh said in June he didn't want to be on Hard Knocks. Now they are. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Netflix has come out with this quarterback docuseries, which, by the way, I started watching last night. Fantastic. It's really good. And then HBO, as the series starts and is available, says, hey, we got a Hard Knocks Aaron Rodgers. And I said this yesterday. Saleh's this good-looking, passionate guy. Aaron's this good-looking guy who now has an opinion on government, vaccines, presidential candidates. And I said, the downside to Aaron having these global opinions is he is the most interesting guy in the league. Do you think he is. He's just interesting. I love Justin Herbert. He's not that fascinating, right? He plays football and talks football. So your takeaway on the Jets on Hard Knocks, I don't think it helps at all. We got an impulsive owner. This is the worst O-line, arguably, he's ever had, a defensive coach. What did you make of the decision by HBO and what it means?
Well, I think this is unprecedented, if I'm not mistaken, that they'd had to force somebody to do it. And so, it goes back to that old line, and I think I've said this to you before, you'd rather have a volunteer than a hostage. And I think the next few weeks are going to be really interesting, because if you look back at it, look at last year, right? The Lions were announced as the Hard Knocks team, I believe, on March 28th. So HBO went in and they had the whole spring to do background work and get B-roll and get all the different things in place that you need to do the series. Think about how intensive the next few weeks are going to have to be for the NFL Films people and the HBO crew going in there and trying to get everything that they need just for the first episode alone. And what sort of cooperation are they going to get? Because that, I think, dictates how good the show is going to be. I don't have any doubt on the Films people. They're fantastic. And I think most coaches, when they get into these situations, have their trepidation. And a lot of times, those sorts of concerns are alleviated because the job that Films does is so sound and so well practiced, and they're so experienced at it. That said, I think part of the reason, and I can tell you for a fact, part of the reason why Saleh and that staff and the front office there didn't want to do this is they feel like with everything that's happened with Rodgers already and everything they've committed to and everything they're doing in-house, they're already sort of at capacity from a media standpoint. And to throw another log on that fire is a really big ask. So again, if you're going to put that kind of ask on those guys, all the people in that building, and now HBO and NFL Films are going to come in and say, oh, yeah, we got to be really intensive over the next 2 or 3 weeks to make sure we get all the footage that we need just for the first episode. I think you create a really interesting environment. And, I think it's going to be on Films to make that work, which will be really interesting to see.
So, I know Sean a little bit, Sean Payton, because I spent some time with him here. And one of the things that I was always taken back by is Sean has a way of doing things, and he has an absolute vision on how he does things. Like, you can see why he changes cultures. Harbaugh's got this. Lincoln Riley. Here's my vision. We're going to lay it down. So, Hackett was literally in September, the Broncos had to give him a veteran assistant just to manage the game. That's not a Sean issue. He doesn't need. So my takeaway is, what are you hearing? What do you expect on the Broncos, the culture? Will we notice it quickly, Albert? Will it take a while? your takeaway on what we're going to see rather quickly, because they got their first 2 games, they'll be favored in at home. Like, a quick start is the fastest way to get guys to buy into your culture.
I think culture shock is probably the right word for a lot of people there. And, Sean Payton knows exactly what he wants. He knows exactly how the program should run. And, quite frankly, Colin, this is exactly what the Broncos needed. I think Nathaniel Hackett was put in an impossible situation last year. Russell Wilson needs somebody who's going to stand up to him, who's going to tell him no on a bunch of things. And that's just, that was a really, really difficult spot to put a first-year coach into. And I think the Broncos knew it. Credit to their new ownership and to Greg Penner for identifying that. That's one of the huge reasons why they made a run at Jim Harbaugh, was because Jim Harbaugh was the type of guy that would be willing to say no to Russell Wilson, that would put his foot in the ground and say, no, I've got a lot of experience doing this. I know how the program is supposed to look. I know how it's supposed to feel. And that's what we're going to build here, not what your vision is for it. And so I think you're going to see a difficult start to training camp for the team. I think there's going to be a little bit of that Parcellsian thing where you're weeding people out early in camp and seeing who can hang and who can't. And I even think the presence of Jarrett Stidham on that roster is interesting. Sean Payton paid him $5 million a year. The guy's played for Bill Belichick in New England. He played for Josh McDaniels in Vegas. He's been in demanding programs. And so right there in the quarterback room now, Russell Wilson's got a guy who is used to that sort of environment. So, and I think part of the reason if you're Payton, you bring him in is because that's somebody who can push Russell Wilson a little bit. So I do think that you're going to see immediate results. I think the team is going to look a lot different, and it's going to create this sort of thing for Russell Wilson where it's either you get on board or you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, that's really interesting. If you look at Stidham's career and who he's had as coaches, they're barkers. They're guys that get in your face. He can handle that. And maybe there's a concern Russell may be uncomfortable with it. Good stuff, Albert Breer. Go back to doing what you do. You get about 2 more weeks of this stuff, and then it's going to be dark rooms and phone calls. That's your life in about 2 weeks. Good seeing you.
I got 1 day left here, so you can let me enjoy at least that much.
All right. Yeah, we interrupted his last day in the Northeast, which is you've been there in the summer. Oh, my God. Nantucket, Martha's.
I have not done Nantucket.
The best place in America, July and August. There's a lot of good places in America. Best place in America, 4th of July to Labor Day.
Come on.
No, I'm not. I've been to all of them. By far. Lobster. You get lobster, lemonade.
Oh, wow. Lobster and lemonade. Jeez. Goodness gracious. Number 1 for sure. Listen, I grew up in Northern Virginia, so we went to a lot of Virginia Beach, Nags Head. Listen, Nags Head was awesome.
Humid.
Oh, it's not hot in Boston?
Not out in the Cape, Nantucket.
Oh, it's just perfect, right? No sharks over there either, right? I haven't read anything about sharks in Nantucket lately.
Fake news. You got one a summer and everybody
pumping up Boston.
No, I'm not pumping up Boston. I'm talking about Rhode Island, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, the
sure
Cape,
it's
Maine,
beautiful, but the best in America? Come on.
Where's the Kennedy compound?
But why do I care about that? The Kennedy
Camelot.
compound.
Come on, that's the best.
Omaha, Nebraska is splendid in July, all right?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.